How have you seen a person's life be ruined in a single day? We had extended family together for a holiday, and everyone was making jokes about how my cousin was late. His mom and dad were involved in the jokes, texting him being upset about how he was late and all. Turns out, someone hit him in a head-on collision on his way over and he died on impact. The police knocked on the door to notify the family like a fucking movie. I'll never forget watching my aunt crumple to the ground. An 18-year-old tried to steal a couple bottles of Hennessy from my store. When I confronted him, he swung the bottle at my head and connected. I rolled with the blow so it didn't do much damage. Charged with assault and robbery by my company. Violent crimes offender, and lost custody of his baby. Edit. Guess I should have said, the company I work for instead of my company, as I am no owner, lol. It's always fricking Hennessy. I've seen like 4 or 5 liquor store robberies. Well, grab and dash type. Not everyone get on the ground, and it's always people grabbing bottles of that fricking mediocre cognac. Edit. Jesus Christ guys. If you really want to know, I've seen it 5 times, and it was black guys twice, a Spanish kid, one was an older white guy, one was a white couple in their 40s. I get it, Henny is popular in the black community. And everyone commenting also wants me to know, those types also steal Patreon. Stop being shitheads. A friend of mine got busted in a drug raid and was caught with half a minivan's worth of weed. Most people measure their weed in grams. Some in ounces. A few in pounds. Then there's this dude measuring his in minivans. I was working in a bank. One day the director fired one of his executives. The whole empty your desk, you're fired speech in front of everyone. The director was furious, and the guy seemed entirely destroyed. Then he explains to all that this guy gave his login and password to a friend in another branch. The friend used that login, and others, while doing some kind of credit card fraud. Police arrested her, but lacked evidence against the fired guy. So they just fired him on the spot. Obviously, besides losing his job, he was also blacklisted to work in banks or finance. I play poker. I once saw a man on my way in betting about 10k all on one roulette spin. He chose red, and lost. He looked defeated. Later that night, a guy at our table told us that he heard the guy on the phone crying in the parking lot, trying to explain to his wife that he lost their money. She was screaming and said she wants a divorce. Gambling addiction is sad. Addicts genuinely believe the next turn will be the winning turn, and so they go all in. They believe that if it had been a winning deal, they'd have been foolish for not going all in and getting that payoff, so they just do it. People who work in hotels and casinos have many stories of people who have lost everything and killed themselves somewhere on property. As a marriage counselor, I often see one confession from a partner absolutely ruin their partner's life, future self-esteem. It's heartbreaking. Like what? Usually things involving infidelity. It really hits people like a ton of bricks. A kid I went to school with and his sister died in a car crash. They were in the car behind the parents' car driving the older sister to her first year of college. Parents made a turn and no longer saw the kid's car behind them. I would say finding both your kids dead is up there. I was working with a guy, 16, one day when he gets a phone call. His dad, mum, brother and sister had gone to pick up the new family car. His dad took a corner too fast and drove straight into the underside of a bridge. Guy lost his entire family in a split second, and the only reason he wasn't in the car too was because he was at work. One guy I knew found out that he was going to be a father on his graduation night. He was 17, and he looked absolutely destroyed. To be fair, a lot of people waste their 20s with booze and bullshit anyway. This kid will be done raising his child by the time he's 35. If this is any kind of kick in the ass to get him on a good, productive life path, his life isn't over by any means. One of my friends was playing online with me when I hear a knock on his door through the mic. His parents walk in and decide to tell them that he is adopted and that they are getting a divorce. All in one go. No emotional breaks or anything, and my friend just breaks down over the mic as his parents walk out. Hey man, I know this is a bad time, but we need heals. On a serious note, I hope he is doing alright. Quite the wombo combo to lay on a kid. Yep. At least several times a month we had to take care of a family who learned that their child had cancer that day. Pretty terrible life-altering news. I spent a lot of time distracting kids with board games coloring while their parents were talking to doctors, crying, and then amazingly pulling it together to continue on. My parents talked about this day for me. I was diagnosed with leukemia when I was between 3 and 4 years old. It was a misdiagnosis, but they said they thought it was a death sentence and it was horrible. Did you live? My stepdad's life was ruined the day his son, my brother, died. He couldn't cope with the loss, couldn't comprehend the rest of us were hurting just as bad, and turned even deeper into the alcohol, and became even more emotionally abusive. Couple years later, when he forced my mom to choose him or me, I watched her make the hardest decision I've probably ever seen her make. She walked away from her husband, the love of her life. Edit, my mother and I no longer have much of a relationship. She made the right choice for the wrong reason. She has point blank told me she regrets having me. My stepdad is, as far as I know, still drunk off his ass and living alone. My mother is alone and living with regrets. As for me, I'm still healing from the scars but mostly doing okay. When I was about 13 I was talking with my best friend at a playground on a hill. Suddenly this lady comes racing down on her bike. She's not wearing a helmet, which was unfortunate, because her bike slipped from underneath her, and she goes flying, smacks her head into a corner. I was too young to know this at the time, but I'm almost certain she died instantly. Wear a helmet. My daily commute takes me past a local skate park. Nobody wears a helmet, let alone any other kind of protection. I can't wrap my head around it. Do people think they look cool or tough because they don't wear a helmet? When I was growing up, a kid on my street fell off his longboard, backwards, and cracked his skull open. Months of recovery, if not years. When I was 7, my father came home from work and told my mother he wanted a divorce. He grabbed a suitcase and packed some things while my mother alternated between crying, trying to cook dinner for me and my brother, and screaming at him that he was insane. She had no idea where this was coming from, and she would change the locks if he left. He did leave, and she did indeed change the locks the very next day. She went from a homemaker to a single mother the next day, and our standing of living fell immensely. I don't think she ever recovered from the stress of the divorce, and trying to raise us on her own. Thinking about what a kind, smart, and wonderful person my mother is, and how my father basically ruined her life when she was only 32 makes me really sad. She just wanted to have kids and then go back to work when we were both in grade school, so she could be a teacher like she wanted to, but the divorce killed that dream. We became latchkey kids in a bad neighborhood while she had to work in call centers, or in hotel housekeeping, because being a teacher didn't pay enough, or give her enough time off to take care of us. I became a surrogate mother for my baby brother when my mother worked long hours. It was a culture shock, to say the least. I remember going to therapy, which I now know was court ordered, because my mom wanted to have sole custody, so she had to have us evaluated to prove that my dad wasn't up to task of sharing custody throughout the divorce proceedings, and counselors telling me over and over that it was going to be okay, that my parents still loved us, and we'd still go to the same school, and have the same life we would have. I didn't believe them at the time, and I was right to. Our lives derailed entirely that single day. I'm okay, so is my brother. But my mother gave all of her health, and the best years of her life to raising us in thankless circumstances while my father failed to pay child support, and came around only enough to avoid a bench warrant or to prevent my mom from gaining sole custody, and increasing his support obligations. It makes me bitter to see him happy now, and my mother in poor health when she's 2 decades too young to have the health problems of an 80-year-old. Related, my grandmother became our second mother in the wake of the divorce. The stress of that killed her as well. You can track pictures of her from about 55, when my parents got divorced, and how young and beautiful she was. Then you look at pictures of her in her 60s, and she looks haggard. She died of cancer in her early 70s. I blocked out the memories of those early days for a long time. I've only recently done the heavy lifting of trying to dig up the emotions and events of my life from age 7 to about 14. I honestly remember little to nothing. Traumatic memory is wild. Pursuant to my goal of trying to support my mom, Partially because she deserves it. Partially because I don't want her to meet the same fate as my grandmother. It's weird to think about how I wouldn't be on the hook for my mom's failing health now. I could have had a happier childhood, and my mom could have had a better life, and my grandmother might not be dead, had my dad just decided not to be a miserable fucking asshole that day, and all the days thereafter.